Okay, I have a 99 Mazda Millenia here, and we're going to be replacing a lot of these components on the front end here, and I've got a whole assortment of stuff. We got the inner and outer tie rods, some lateral links, we've got the control arm, ball joint, and we're going to be working on the front end here. And I'm just going to get started on the passenger side and just show you how we're going to replace a lot of this stuff. And I did have to rent a few tools. You're definitely going to need a tool to remove that inner tie rod, and it's going to look something like this. And you got different pieces for sizes according to what you need. And so I got this from the parts store, and you have to put a deposit down, but you're going to need one of them. And I've got also got a tool to just pop the tie rods and stuff, and we're going to have to use that. Sometimes you can just peck on them and knock them out of there with a hammer if you're not too rough with it. So we're going to go ahead and get started on this now, and we're going to have to get it jacked up and on jack stands and stuff, and then we'll work on getting the tire off. Okay, I'm just using a 13/16 to take these off here. Okay, now we can just get the tire out of the way. We're just going to slide this back under here for now. Okay, I just wanted to give you a view of what we're replacing here. Got our inner tie rod, got the outer tie rod, we've got our ball joint, our control arm piece, and then we've got this the lateral link, and then we got this little I think this is a stabilizer. This is a lateral link, but this is just all the pieces that we're going to be replacing. And like the only one that I don't have is this one right up here, so hopefully that one's not just too terrible just yet. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to need to get to our components down here, so I'm thinking I'm just going to go ahead and remove the rotor, or get the caliper off, and then we'll get the rotor out of the way because I'm going to need more room to get to the ball joint. Okay, I think we're just going to start with this one right here. We're just going to get this pin off here and get this nut off. And this here's a 17. Okay, now because I'm replacing this, I just took a hammer and just knocked that thing out of there. Now, if you were going to reuse this, you'd probably want to be a bit more cautious. Use a piece of wood, or try to get you some type of a tie rod puller to pop it off there, because if you damage those threads, you're going to be replacing it. Okay, now on this end it's real dirty, but it's got a specific location with this special little washer, and I'm just going to put a mark on that washer and this right here, so hopefully it won't throw everything off. Everything's going to have to be aligned anyways, but just trying to keep everything as close as I can anyway. Okay, and that there's a 17 as well. However, you got a bolt on this side over here that you're going to have to hold as well. Okay, and here's this little washer thing I was talking about. And so we just put a mark on it. It just helps to get that into alignment, adjustment. Okay, now here's how this bolt looks, and it kind of goes in a certain way as well. That's like a made-on washer, and I would point out that it's a tight fit. I had to get on this side and knock it out through there because it's kind of a tight fit. You can see where it was rubbing, but it does come out of there, and we'll have to make sure that we get that oriented back in the same way that it was in that spot. And I just wanted to show you how this little adjustable boat works. It's got these grooves, and this washer fits into those, and so that adjusts. And it's a good idea just to keep all this stuff together so you don't get it mixed up. Okay, so we've got this link loose. However, it's not just going to come out of here, so we're using a little pry bar to kind of push up on it, and that's going to help us just work it up and out of there. Okay, and there we have that piece. Okay, I'm down here on this tie rod. I just took this pin out, and this is a 17 millimeter right here as well. And I'm going to go ahead. I've got a tool to pop that off there, so I'm going to use that so I'm not having to mess around with it. Okay, and this tie rod tool just slides over there like that, and we're just going to tighten down on this right here and pop it out of there. Okay, this is pretty tight, so I've got a 13/16 on this nut, and you have to clean this up a little bit to be able to see these, and I've got a 3/4 on this part of the tie rod here. So you got a nut there, so I'm holding that, and I took a 3/4 on this part, and also used a cheater bar while that was holding against that over there to give me some stability. And I just put a piece of tape to kind of mark the location. I doubt these are going to be the same exact length. I'm hoping they are, so I can get everything back close. Like I said, it's going to have to be a line anyway. But now that this is loose, we can just go ahead and take this entire tie rod off of here. Okay, so you got these pieces in here. You just find the one that fits. I ended up with 1 inch and 3/16 and slipped that on there. We've got this piece of pipe that's going to go on here, and it just fits on to that. And then we get back here with a 1/2 inch breaker bar, and we're going to get this loose, so that just slips. Once you got that on there, this just slips onto that, and then we can take this thing loose. So I'm going to get my 1/2 inch breaker bar over here. We'll just get back here and get this inner tie rod took loose. Okay, and it was pretty snug, and as it turned out, I wound up using my breaker bar and my 3-foot piece of cheater pipe there to get that loose. Okay, and that's just going to unscrew out of there just like that. And we'll go ahead and get our new one back into place. Okay, so I'm putting some Loctite back on here. I've counted the same number of threads and put that nut where it was on the other one, and just put a piece of tape so I'm not having to lose track. So we're going to go ahead and just get this, start it by hand, and we'll just finish tightening it with the wrench when we get it snugged down. Okay, and I'm going 75 foot-pounds on this inner tie rod. Okay, and I'm getting this outer tie rod. I've just got a little bit of Loctite on it, and I'm just running it up to the nut there, and then we're just going to tighten them both together really good. Okay, so I've tightened those together to where I'm comfortable that it's really good and snug, and like I said, I'll take my one wrench and bump it over here for the final snug, and put a wrench on this and use my cheetah pipe to make sure it's really good and tight. So we're just going to keep moving along here and take off everything that we know we're going to need to replace, and we might as well go ahead and get this one here next. Okay, and I'm just using a wrench to get both of these. It's kind of tight in here. Okay, with that out of the way, we're going to move on to this CV axle, because we're going to have to get it out of our way to be able to get this lower ball joint. So we got a nut right there that's going to have to come off, and it's just going to be right in the way. So there's a little groove. Just hit that with a punch or a screwdriver, and we're going to get an axle remover on here, or socket rather. I'm using a 33. I think this is more like a 32, but with it being 6-sided, it's not a big deal. It'll take it off of there. That's can't find my 32 or 31 right now. Okay, so with that axle nut off, we've just take a rubber mallet and a bolt and knock that back a little ways. We're going to go ahead and get these 17s that are right here on the bottom, 3 of them. We'll go ahead and remove those. Okay, with those bottom bolts out, these here, there was 3 of them. I've just took and set this up on some blocks. It's just kind of hanging here. This is the only thing holding it. So I've just kind of got it set in here, and now I can go ahead and get to this. And notice it's kind of crimped, so we'll have to kind of uncrimp that a little bit before we get a socket on there. But now with the CV axle, I've just kind of got it setting over out of the way. We can get to this and see about getting this pressed off of there to get the other one. So we're just going to leave this alone unless we have to. No sense in taking more stuff loose than we have to. And matter of fact, you know, I was thinking about the brake caliper, but there's not going to be any sense in removing that. So we're just going to leave that on as well. I'm just using a big 15/16 6-sided to remove this. Okay, so I had this propped up here. It took a good amount of licks to knock that out, so that'd probably be the most difficult part of this. So we'll go ahead and get the new one into position here. Okay, so we've got our new one here. We're going to go ahead and get it into place. I'm just going to reuse these old bolts, and this has got a new nut on here, so that's a Teflon. Won't have to worry about the crimping. I think I'm just going to go with the Teflon that come with. It'll be easier. So that's probably a one-time use anyways, unless you crimp it back. So we're going to go ahead and get this on here. Okay, so we're just getting these back in here with some Loctite. Okay, I've got those snug down. I haven't torqued them yet. I'm just going to go ahead and slide this back into here now. Okay, now this will want to spin as you're tightening, and I've went 105 foot-pounds, but you can tap up on it and get some pressure and get it in there real good, and it should tighten for you, or an impact works really great. So I'm going to go ahead and torque these bolts here. I'm going to go 85 foot-pounds on those, and then we'll move on. Okay, because I got ahead of myself on putting those lower bolts in before I got the CV axle back into place here, I had to take these up here loose for this piece to get some slack, and I had to take this little cable so I could just swing this top down and slide that CV axle in, just because you just don't have enough room to get it back in there. But I'd already had these lower ones Loctited and everything torqued, so I didn't want to mess with them. So I've got the CV axle in now. I'm going to go ahead and fasten this back up here where it goes and get that cable back on there. Okay, we're getting ready to put this little stabilizer link, and it's actually got some little Allen heads. You can hold it still so it's not spinning. We're just going to get it right back in here, and we'll probably have to jack this up just a little bit to get it to line up with this. So we'll just go ahead and start, get the bottom one on first, and we'll put a little Loctite too. Okay, because of the difficulty of getting in here with a torque wrench, I was figuring on 45 foot-pounds, but I just got it as tight as I could using a couple of wrenches. I've just replaced this axle nut. I haven't torqued it yet. Okay, we're just sliding this into place, and it's a snug fit, and we're going to realign our washer where it goes. First thing, we want to go ahead and get this into here before we get anything go too far. But So we want to make sure to get our washer back to the way it was. Okay, so I've tapped that special bolt back into the back side. I could tell from the dirt, I just put it back in the same position it was in. And as for this side here, there's a mark. There's a mark on here that we've got to align that with. It's got a little divot right there. So just like that, and then we know we've got it in the right position. And we're just going to go ahead and put some Loctite on this as well. And I'm going to tighten this back down. I'm going to go 45 foot-pounds. Okay, now I'm just pushing this back up into position here. And we've got a nut and a pin. And I'm gonna torque this down to 45 as well. Okay, so I'm just sliding this tie rod back up in here now, and I'm gonna go ahead and get this nut, and it's got a little pin for it as well. Okay, so we've got all of our links and tie rod and everything torqued and in place. We're just gonna go ahead and get our wheel back on, and finally we're just gonna torque this back to 200 foot-pounds. Okay, and make sure to pop this out before you put your tire on. And we went ahead and torqued that down, back down to 200. And we're also gonna knock this back in. And you can tell it when you get back where it's supposed to be there. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna take this tire back off. It'll be easier to knock that back in. And then we'll replace the cap and get the lug nuts back on. So that's the only thing we got left. And so hopefully that's been helpful, and thank y'all for watching.